Thank you, Alexander, for the quick wrap up. And I think that even we started 7 minutes later than the schedule, we will be on time. Let's open the floor for questions. Please, your name, organization, and to whom you're addressing the question.
Erwin Cornelis, expert to ANEC, and ANEC is also a member of Smart Living EPC, one of the projects over there. I have a question for Mr. Greslou. I'm very impressed by your next generation EPC, but aren't we a bit in limbo because it's so rich in information? And so isn't there any risk that for the user, it might be too rich in information and that the user is lost in information? So I see a lot of key performance indicators, but is there also perhaps also a need for key performance indicators to make it more condensed and summarized? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good question. We see the EPCs as potentially modular tools. Here I display the template where we have different sections with all KPIs about the different key topics also requested by the EPBD and how we could shape a quite dense but a full EPC 2 pages with this information. But for instance, there is information about the energy consumption that you might today not get on most buildings. So that could be seen either as a part that you do not fill in or as an annex of the EPC. We also worked on a simplified template of the EPC, which I did not display here, but where we have the key KPIs that you just have really the core information that is easy to understand by an owner, because the template I displayed is rather for policymakers, financial institutions, energy professionals helping the owners, but the owner might not be able to understand each section there. So once again, maybe we should not see the EPC as a large data repository where we have everything. We could have, in some cases, additional pages, annexes, which we also tested in a former project called Aldrin for non-residential buildings, where we had additional pages about the IEQ performance of the building, for instance, and specific ratings. So we display ways we show ways to display key KPIs, but then it's up, of course, to people to choose in a given context what they would like to add in an EPC.
Thank you, Rui. You had a question. Meanwhile, Antonio, if we can check if we have also online questions. No, okay.
So my name is Rui Fragoso, came from the Portuguese Energy Agency. Congratulations to all the 4 projects. We also engage in some of them. I want to make a quick question for the EUB SuperHub project related with the resilience indicator. So I noticed that you have a comfort indicator, but also a resilience indicator. What kind of assumptions and inputs are you using for that specific indicator?
Thank you. Basically, the indicator corresponds to the adaptation indicator levels. So basically, we are focusing on thermal comfort, and we perform a calculation assuming the future climatic conditions. So in this way, it's possible to understand what will be the behavior of the building in the moment the climate will change. Of course, I also connect maybe with the previous question. We have 21 key performance indicators in our EPC. The reason is because in our approach, as I said, EPCs now need to expand the scope. We need to integrate additional topics, always related to the energy, of course. And so the complexity is rising. The matter is to communicate this complexity in a way that is understandable to the different actors. Calculation of KPIs can be complex, but this is done by professionals that need to be trained. The matter is to have this information understandable on the EPCs in the way that any user can understand the performance of the building, not only from the side of energy consumption, but also cost of energy and environmental indoor quality and so on. So it's for us, the CWA has been just the first step. We will revise it in future, also collecting inputs from the different projects, because all the projects worked on indicators. So it's a first tentative to have a document, let's say, connecting the different indicators, but it's open. It can be revised in the future, maybe integrating inputs from the other projects.
You, and you said you have a question?
Dave Jenkins from Heriot-Watt University, and it's for EPC RECAST again. So you're focusing on residential buildings and therefore dealing with residential energy assessors who may have perhaps lower kind of competencies in terms of skills and education and background. But you're talking about technologies such as thermography, dynamic simulation, BIM, heat flux sensors, which some of those energy assessors may be not familiar with and may not have the training to operate that. So have you had any feedback from residential EPC assessors in different countries to try to understand the level of investment that would be required in that EPC assessor workforce to be able to, so that they could interact with those kind of technologies that they're not going to have been trained to use?
Yes.
Yes, we worked with, so we did 55 pilot visits in 6 countries. So we subcontracted EPC assessors in each country. And each time, so there was an EPC assessor doing the normal standard EPC and someone from the project, from one of the partners, diagnosing the building with the tools developed. And the EPC assessor could see how we were doing things and how we could manipulate the tool, especially on the iPad. And then we made questionnaires with those people to analyze their interest. Of course, we cannot say that all EPC assessors are interested in it, but we had very good reactions from a lot of them in the different countries. You need to do several on-site visits with the tool to get used to it, to detect properly the walls and be able to, but then after a while, you are able to do it fast. So a lot of them said it could reduce maybe 30% or 40% of their working time, but that depends on the context and on their own practices. So we can also discuss with Sarah here, who conducted the reports and the questionnaires, about the second technique with the heat flux sensors. Of course, if you have a cheap in EPC, already the cost is high because the person comes just to visit once the building. So we are not going to say it's going to be usable in the next years in single family houses, but maybe for larger scale multifamily buildings or non-residential buildings, we could afford the cost because it costs only a few €100 to get the sensors, and an additional few €100 to get the material to collect the data online. So maybe in total, it's 3,000 euros overall for the measurement testing for several zones in a given building. So that could be used in larger scale buildings to do EPCs or energy audits. And another thing where it could be used is to measure parameters of the envelope for all buildings where you often do not know the characteristics of the materials because they were not standardized in the old time. And so it could be used to conduct large-scale experiments, then to evaluate default values of these parameters in national simulations.
Okay, any other question? Yes, Andrea?
Hello, this is Andreas Androchopoulos from the Center for Renewable Energy Sources in Greece. We are working also with this kind of projects, and we're taking part in a number of them right now. My main question is to Olivier, and I would like to know what, regarding this new calculations tool you propose regarding the stage renovation. How do you propose to do it? And you also mentioned about tenant view. You are taking in account the tenant view in regarding the recommendations. How you do that, and will you balance this with the normal and typical recommendations that should be performed from the energy auditor?
Okay, there are two very different topics. So to understand, if you could maybe just slightly rephrase the first question. So the way the simulation engine could be used. With steps, I mean.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Well,
How to suggest this step one? How did you come up with which step one?
okay. Well, we didn't develop, I mean, technical advice replacing the energy auditor about how it should be made. So this was just a part of the project where the idea was to show that you use the same detailed simulation engine with a quick data input to run simulation steps. And of course, for instance, in IB Road to EPC, I suppose there is additional technical expertise about what you should do, what you should not do at a given step to facilitate the work of the assessor. We implemented such a thing in a simpler way. I mean, where we have warnings, for instance, if you're changing the window, but you do not insulate thermally the building envelope, you might get humidity or issues with around the window. So these are kind of typical warnings that we implemented in the tool. So if you're selecting different renovation options at a given step, and maybe you forgot to click on other ones you should do at the same time, you get warnings from the tool. So there is some kind of simplified technical expertise. Then it's up to the user to choose what he wants to do, and then you have the engine that runs the simulation behind. And about the discussion with the tenant, I mean, there is no strong support in the tool to facilitate that. It's just that it's easy to move back and forth in the tool from a step to another one. It's because it's a simple interface. You can click, launch quickly the simulation, show it to the tenant, modify things depending on his will and what he planned to do. So you can, on the field, run different options, scenarios, and showcase it to the owner.
We can discuss it over lunch.
Yes, okay. Do we have any other question? Okay, first question from the last rows. Oh.
Thank you. My name is Horia. I'm from Bucharest, which is a crazy city in Romania. I'm part of the IB Road project, and I want rather to comment or to launch an open question. Apparently, if you put EPC RECAST with IB Road to EPC, taking some tools from EPC RECAST, from collecting data and from calculation, which in IB Road to EPC, it's external thing, it's third party, let's say, together with a very attractive roadmap that is built in the IB Road, you will have the building renovation passport. So I know that the projects will end, but maybe we can think of how can we explore and exploit these results. And maybe this is an open question also for the Commission in the assistance that will be made to the member states in detailing what is now in the EPBD recast. Thank you.
So it was just a comment, Horia. You're not expecting any answer from our...
Not now. It's an open question.
Okay, it's an open question. Okay. Someone wants to comment back to Horia? Okay. Yes. You have a question? I need to breathe. Sorry?
So, wait, Alice, keep the microphone.
Yes, the microphone. Okay. How many microphones?
About using this kind of results. At the moment, the IEPB project is running.
Your name first and organization.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
My name is Directive from ISO, and we are involved in both EPBD projects and Wankelijk Reno. Irma is also included in Wankelijk Reno. And in IEPB, we are working on a common data model, and in Wankelijk Reno, we are working on automatic generated building renovation passports. So I assume that we are already starting with the ideas you are mentioning.
So I'm sorry, that was a question or just a comment? It would just reply to Horia. Okay, good. Any other question from the audience? Because I have one for you, Norberto. I said it in the beginning, if I may, just because to also bring, you know, the citizens element in that. You mentioned twice or three times, I remember during your presentation, the connections of EPCs with the energy communities. And since there is a huge evolution of the energy communities across Europe, if you can explain further how this is done, because usually when we are saying about energy communities, we mean production of energy, production for selling or for self-net metering. But there are, of course, energy communities that they're working on building renovation, but they are, you know, just few, not all of them. If you can explain further on that.
Yes, it was a very general comment highlighting the fact that you need accurate data if you want to enter a energy community. Production, perhaps also consumption. And this consumption data, which needs to be accurate, needs to be hourly, doesn't normally come from an EPC or doesn't come from EPC. You need advanced models. So that is something else the EPC, in my opinion, unless we make it exceedingly complex for many people, it can handle with difficulty. We need more advanced models for that.
We need more advanced model, but it's good that it was mentioned about the EPC and the connection. And the second one about the non-energy benefits that we named again, because we need to be a little bit more citizen-centric. So it's your turn.
Well, maybe two things from the project. The first one is that we added a thermal comfort score to the EPC. If you run policy simulations, then you're able to better evaluate, for instance, the free floating temperature inside the building during summer. So you could get simplified indicators to report the quality of the building in terms of summer thermal comfort. The other one is based on the on-site diagnosis, since you can take easily pictures and centralize them in your centralized data flow and data model. You can display easily to the occupant that maybe there are some technical issues with the building that he did not understand and that could be improved through renovation steps. So this is made through observations for some traces of humidity and on the wall, some cracks, for instance, or a lack of monitoring, not monitoring, but I don't remember the word in English, but anyway, if you have a mechanical ventilation system that you're not properly maintaining, for instance. So these are all a lot of things that a trainee auditor can see through observation and then store inside the centralized data model to facilitate communication with the owner.
Thank you. And before giving the floor to Alexander for the last question, just one comment from my side. From the social science perspective is that everything that was heard today was, of course, amazing and all the evolution. But talking from the perspective of the citizens, we need to highlight all these non-energy benefits as well to communicate differently with citizens if we want all these tools to be, you know, well received and adapted and used in the coming years. So Alexander, the floor is yours for the last question.
So the question is, Norberto, one of the insights I heard from your presentation, I found it very surprising. So introduction, there is a book called The Wisdom of Crowds. It has some very interesting examples. One is that you go to this huge live concert of 10,000 people. The singer is singing something. He says, "It's you can sing it now." And this crowd, where many of those thousands of people are probably completely tone deaf, come up overall statistically with a very accurate rendering of that song. So here you explained how very different approaches from different countries with a lot of subjectivity in certain cases on the part of the energy auditor, at the end, they bring very close rating in terms of energy labels. So I have two questions on this. One, does this really mean that these, at the end of the day, they work? One question. And the second, is there any, did you see any chance of
where these methodologies, these approaches, calculation procedures, whatever, are sort of interchangeable in the same way that you can have a UK car, even today, driving, just change perhaps, the way that you think of the road because it's on the wrong, the steering wheel on the wrong side. But nevertheless, it works in EU roads.
It is a very complex answer to a very good question. I would say that the sort of fluctuations we get when we do this cross comparison among countries is more or less commensurate with the sort of variance you get when you do that in your own country. I presented yesterday an exercise that Dave did in the UK, showing that you have that sort of one, perhaps two letter jumps when you perform the same evaluation by two different assessors in the same country for the same building. So we think it is fairly consistent. Are they interchangeable? It is difficult to answer, but I don't think it is. Just the climate conditions of each country are way too different. That was a major obstacle, as I said, in our cross-assessment. So it is difficult to interchange them. In other ways, you have to give some in other words, you have to give some flexibility to the countries to be able to adapt this EPC methodology to their own conditions. That, in my opinion, is unquestionable. So that would be my answer, I think, in summary.
Okay, thank you. And we have online questions, and I think that we need to take them. Antonio, can you help me on this? The microphone, sorry.
Yes, we have two open questions. One, if the EPBD recast will imply the renovation of the mandate M480 regarding the standards of the energy performance calculations in buildings. I don't know if
Who will answer this question? I think that, no? It was the EPC RECAST project?
No, the EPBD recast, the new directive is going to imply the renovation of the standards.
No, I think that some official needs to answer that. We will come back to this question later.
Okay.
And the second one?
The second one is if one of any of the projects have used the life cycle cost indicator, and if you can provide some details about
project was that? Sorry.
It's an open question.
It's an open question.
Any project has used this life cycle cost,
life cycle
cost indicator.
Yes. Okay. Andrea Moro. He's close.
Okay. Among the 21 indicators, there is one on costs. In reality, it just takes a piece of the life cycle, focusing on the operational phase. As said, we focus on the levels indicators. One is a life cycle cost, it's also including the cost for the renovation, maintenance of the building. But we face a big issue concerning the availability of data. For performing life cycle cost, you need to know the duration of materials, how many times you are going to replace it. So this is still weak. And so it's a very important issue to be taken in account in EPCs. But from a practical point of view, our project basically decided not to include the whole life cycle because of this lack of information. At least not, it's an information not available in all the countries. So you will have a weak indicator.
Okay. Any other question? The last one, because we need to wrap up for this session. Okay. Thank you to all. First of all, the speakers for presenting the outcomes, you for your questions, and as well the online attendees for being in this session as well. And now it's time for our lunch break.